is now on the table for our consideration.
Mr. Chairman, would you like to take roll call real quick?
Oh, that would be a good thing to start with. Thank you.
No problem. Representative Bratton?
Here.
Representative Erickson? Here. Representative Guggenmoss? Excused. Representative Kelly?
Here.
Representative Lawley?
Here.
Representative Singh?
Excused.
Representative Strock? Here. Representative Williams?
Here.
Chairman Andrew?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, Senate File 126 is now on the table for our consideration. Senator Rothfuss.
Mr. Chairman, committee, thank you for the opportunity to talk through Senate File 126, establishment of a K-8 public lab school. Mr. Chairman, this legislation comes from, honestly, a little bit of conflict that took place with regard to the lab school over the past few years that came to a head recently, and we're trying to address it with a solution that allows the lab school to continue to be vibrant into the future and to return to effectively its heyday when it was a high-performing institution on behalf of the state of Wyoming that was a key piece of our educator education system, as well as an exceptional school, always has been an exceptional school at the university. A brief bit of background, the University Lab School has been around for 138 years as a piece of the University of Wyoming, an important part of the university for educator training. About 25 years ago, when the school foundation program funding model changed, it was moved to the district. So it became a district-funded school, but at that point in time, an MOU was put in place between the university and the district to allow a continuation of operations so that the lab school was effectively an independent school operating for the purpose of the mission of the lab school. And that independence was key to its function. In recent years, that independence has waned. The school district has taken control of many of the resources in a way that has limited its capacity to operate functionally as this independent lab school on behalf of the university, on behalf of the people of the state of Wyoming, and that led to tension between the university and the district. The university got to the point where they felt if it's not operating as a lab school any longer, if it's not serving the mission of the university and the people of the state of Wyoming, there was no sense in continuing its operation on the campus. And so they ended up, through the Board of Trustees, moving to eliminate the lab school and basically announced a closure date, which would be at the end of this current school year. So Albany County delegation was very concerned about this approach, as well as part of the process of the approach, where not a lot of public input was taken from the university side of things. And we tried to bring together the two parties to come to a conclusion to continue operation of the lab school for longer, a minimum of 2 years, but trying to extend that MOU to fix the issues. That did not regrettably work out. And we let them know as we were working through that process that this was an essential part of the state. This was a state institution, and that we felt that it was something that the legislature needed to be engaged on. And we let them know that we would bring legislation to continue the operation and to put together a lab school model if they were unable to come to a compromise. So here we are, regrettably. I wish we didn't have this legislation before us, but I now see it actually as an incredible opportunity to really improve the lab school above and beyond what its best days were by bringing some better attention to it, bringing some better management approach to it, and moving it to the point where it reports back to this committee, the Joint Education Committee, to move forward on that mission. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll walk through the legislation and try to hit the high notes for you all. On page 2, indicates that this is a part of the obligations of the University of Wyoming, right? This has been a University of Wyoming institution for its entire life, and it will continue as a University of Wyoming institution as a K-8 public school. You see its mission would be to promote developmentally appropriate differentiated instruction that is model learner-centered for students, serve as teacher education institution and educational learning site, and identify best practices for teaching that can be utilized in public schools statewide. On page 3, the lab school shall be a coordinated effort between the University of Wyoming and the resident school district, operated on the main campus of the university. The C paragraph, this is an independent public school within the resident school district and shall be accountable to a governing board, which we'll get to soon. The D paragraph, the public lab school established shall be located on the main campus of the University of Wyoming. It's currently operated at the main campus of the University of Wyoming in the College of Education building and has been for many years. On page 4, the governing board. This governing board, which basically will have the authority over all of the operations, contracting, personnel, similar to how a charter school board works for a charter school, it would operate in that capacity. Comprised of one member of the resident school district board of trustees, superintendent of the resident school district or designee, dean of the University of Wyoming's College of Education or designee, a member appointed by the dean of the Wyoming College of Education, so 2 members of the school district, 2 members of the College of Education. The superintendent of public instruction, or his designee, it says in statute, we know that's her designee in real life. On to page 5, 1 teacher that instructs at the lab school, 1 parent of a student that attends the lab school, and then the principal of the lab school is the 8th member that would be an ex officio non-voting member but would be chairing the board. The governing board may negotiate and contract with any entity in the state. Moving on to page 6, not just in the state, any entity at all. If the contract is with the University of Wyoming or the resident school district, the services shall be provided at incremental cost. C paragraph is the right to sue or be sued. D paragraph is that the governing board shall have authority over its budget, services, and personnel matters. Bottom of page 6, the E paragraph, it shall have authority over educational placements at the lab school. And this is a key role for the lab school, has been educational placements. Obviously, we have our student teachers are statewide. That would continue. They're all over the state, but a lot of pre-service teaching placements take place at the lab school. A few years ago, it would be 1,000 sign-ins a year was commonplace. So you had 1,000 student opportunities to learn at the lab school would take place in any given year. You see on page 7, the F paragraph. This is a provision that would be new and I think pretty exciting, that would report to the Joint Education Interim Committee and bring student achievement data, enrollment, level of engagement with Wyoming's College of Education, impact of the school on the University of Wyoming's teaching program, and any proposed statutory modifications. That connection between the lab school and the Joint Education Committee is a great way to bring this back to its statewide institutional responsibilities and keep it in line with its mission. Page 8, public lab school shall be authorized to offer any educational program. Romanet 2, meet the state uniform educational program standards. On the B provision, it would be free from specified school district policies and may waive state board policies. All of this language is charter school language, so it's simply copied and pasted from charter school language in statute right now. So what we're seeing here isn't new. It's exactly the type of language and flexibilities that charter schools are given where they're responsible to their board. On the bottom of page 9, nothing in this subsection shall be deemed to exempt the public lab school from any civil rights, student assessment, Public Records Act, and public meeting requirements, again, consistent with our public charter schools. Bottom of page 10, admission to be open to all students. The capacity of the lab school in no event shall not exceed 200 students. That basically means the capacity will be kept above 200 students, but that doesn't mean enrollment is necessarily above 200 students. It just means that at all times you'll have a capacity above 200, and then people will opt in. It's a public school of choice, so they'll opt in up to the number that is the capacity, and then beyond that, it will be a lottery basis, as with any other school of choice, where enrollment will be based on lottery, but sibling enrollment preference and continuation would be allowed. On to page 11, funding of the model is funded through the Education Resource Block Grant as a kindergarten through grade 8 school, and payment is directly to the school through the board, unless the resident district and the governing board of the public lab school mutually agree in writing to fund in an alternative manner. Again, consistent with how a district charter school operates, the money flows to the school, but pursuant to an agreement, you could make modifications where some of the funds generated by the school would stay at the district level if they were providing services, which hopefully they would be providing services that would warrant that. On to page 12. Governing board shall begin negotiations upon the effective date. And the C paragraph was something we added based on the original fiscal note. When you open a new school, you generate additional revenue, resources. That was not the intent because this is a school that's already operating. It's continuing operation. So the C paragraph is just a provision that says we're not going to treat it as a new school from the funding standpoint. We're going to treat it as a continuing school generating resources so that you don't have any implications to the school foundation program model. We don't kick in the new school provision. We just continue it. So that makes it cost neutral effectively on the operation. And then the page 13 is an immediate effective date. That's the bill, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee has about the legislation or about the background, and I know there's a lot of people that would like to speak.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what we're doing here is essentially reinventing the lab school as a charter school. Why was the route chosen to go this way instead of through the processes laid out under current charter school statute?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, this is a little bit of a unicorn because we need the University of Wyoming to provide the operations on campus. It becomes a University of Wyoming program as it was for over 100 years and an obligation of the university. The standard charter process, whether it's through the district or whether it's through a statewide authorized charter board, doesn't have the statutory authority to do what this is doing, calling in individuals. It would have been handy if we could have just said, all right, well, let's use the charter process, but it regrettably doesn't work.
Further questions? Representative Strzok.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Senator Rothfuss. So my question is, I was just curious, do the teachers, the students that are going to school, can they opt in? Is this mandatory for all of the teachers, or is this something they can say, oh, I would love to work a time at this lab, or will this be part of the curriculum or something they have to do at the university?
Senator Rothfuss.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Strzok, traditionally they have classes that are practicum type classes where they're going to have classroom engagements, and they're, again, when the lab school was operating as it was supposed to be, not in the last, say, 5 years, but prior, there was a lot of fluency between those students, the college students in the classroom, and then going into the education spaces, making observation, then going back to the classroom. So there was a lot of coordination, and as I said, about 1,000 student visits per year would take place. It was relatively easy flowing. So if you're taking the education courses, you probably end up doing some observational or experiential learning through the classroom at the lab school. And again, this is in addition to the other types of educational experiences you'd get through student teaching and maybe practicums at other district schools, which would still be available. But only through the co-location with the College of Education can you really have that seamless engagement that took place for many years.
Representative Braden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have a question on page 3, line 2, where it talks about this will be a coordinated effort between the University of Wyoming and the resident school district. Is the University of Wyoming present here, which I do not see? Okay, so they're going to testify for him. And I also am wondering if the educational college dean wants this, and the resident school district. I mean, those are 3 of the players. I want to know all their opinions.
Senator Rothfuss.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brenton, the university wants to close the lab school, and they've made that clear. The district doesn't want to continue to work with the lab school, and so you'll probably hear that in testimony also. They see it as a funding threat. The College of Education, I haven't looked around the room. They haven't typically provided testimony to this point. They've been represented by the upper administration of the university that has decided that they wanted to close it. So I don't think we'll hear from the College of Education at this point in time.
All right, thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Happy to answer more questions as they come up.
The Department of Education like to comment on this bill?
No, next. Sorry. Fake.
All right, would any legislators in the room like to testify on this bill? All right, we will open public testimony. I think there are quite a few people waiting to testify on this, so we'll do 20 minutes each in opposition and in support. Oh, right, okay. Would the University of Wyoming like to comment on this bill? Sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike Smith for the university. Maybe before I get into my prepared remarks, just to answer Mr. Chairman through you, Representative Bratton's question. I'm sure the district is represented here and you will hear from them. As I mentioned, I represent the university. I also represent the views of the Dean of the College of Education. And I think the main point was Senator Rothfuss briefly went through some of the history of the negotiation of what would have been the third five-year iteration of this MOU. And in that process, there was a dispute about how much the district would share information, for instance, on security threats that occurred at the school with the university. We have our own police department on campus. We share, we're co-located there with this school. We thought we deserved to know when certain events were occurring at the school, and that was not something the district wanted to include in the MOU. And so through that process, our operations team went to the College of Education and said, okay, we're getting some pushback on this. If we're going to renew this for another 5 years, talk to us about the educational value for your teacher candidates. And the answer was, it's a great school, but it serves no special purpose as compared to any Albany County School District. And we work with all the schools in Laramie and many schools throughout the state. And that's what our College of Education wants to focus on. They want to focus on integrating and working with schools around the entire state and that community and not one particular. And so that was the answer and when that answer came back, then that kind of led the whole discussion to, well, maybe this great school, the time has come, like so many schools around Wyoming. Mr. Chairman, just I want to make clear at the outset, this is the epitome of a local control issue. This bill has what we consider some serious constitutional issues. It's opposed by the school district that's operated the school for the last 26 years. It's opposed by the landlord of the school, as I just mentioned, UW, who created the school originally and operated it without legislative, intervention for all those years. And it served a great purpose. Originally as a prep school, a lot of communities in Wyoming didn't have a high school. So if you wanted to attend the University of Wyoming, you came to campus and you went to the prep school and got what you needed to prepare you for that freshman year at college. It developed over years into what was called the lab school and operated as the lab school. And as you heard, that function has now ended as well. To the Constitution, just quickly point out Article 3, Section 27, that states the legislature shall not pass local or special laws in any of the following enumerated cases. That is to say, tons of language, providing for the management of common schools. That's what this bill does. I'm worried about the precedent this bill will be setting. I live here in Cheyenne. They're slated to close 8 schools. One of them is the grade school where my 2 daughters attended, and incidentally, my wife attended when she was their age. That one's slated for closure. So there's a lot of students and parents and teachers at those schools here in my community that are arguing that they're great schools, they serve a great purpose, and they don't want them to see them close. And I can imagine many of them will be banging down your door next year when it's time to have a similar discussion. I just don't think it's good policy. You'll hear a lot today about how this school can benefit the entire state. And what's interesting is I don't see the statewide entities affiliated with education here clamoring for this bill. The Wyoming Education Association isn't taking a position that I'm aware of on the bill. I don't think the school district trustees or the superintendents are taking a position on the bill. You don't see the charter schools community demanding that you support this as a school of choice. As far as I know, none of those organizations have taken a position on this bill. It's because it's a local issue.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. If you could take a few moments to wrap up your comments, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have several proposed amendments to discuss. With your indulgence, I'll try to skip around a little bit and run through those quickly. I just point out on page 2, lines 12 through 14, that's the extent of the curriculum that you're aware of that this school will implement. Charter schools spend a couple years sometimes and 500 pages in their application disclosing all the intricacies of what their curriculum's going to be. That's absent here. Let's see, on page 5, lines 17 through 20, we have grave concerns about the governing board being able to operate and maintain the University of Wyoming building. That doesn't seem appropriate. Ask you to delete the operation and maintenance thereof on lines 20 to 21. Page 6, line 19 to page 7, line 2, that entire E should be deleted. Maybe there's a rework, but really as it's written, it's the governing board that determines educational placements of students enrolled at the University of Wyoming. Again, maybe unintended, but that's needs to be fixed. It's the university that will determine placements in cooperation with schools all over the state, as we already do. And this, I worry, could give some authority to that governing board to say, no, we need more students placed here to the detriment of other schools around the state. We mentioned on page 7, sorry, Mr. Chairman, page 7, line 23, there's no reference in the reporting to the aspect of statewide innovation that's included on page 2. So page 2, lines 20 and 21 says one of the purposes is identifying best teaching practices to be utilized in public schools statewide. It seems like part of the reporting ought to be a report on that statewide adoption of some of that innovation. I just want to note charter schools in their applications, they have to give a set of assurances. Assurance number 6, the proposed charter school guarantees that the sole purpose of the charter school is not to avoid consolidation or closure of any school. That's not waivable. Another unwaivable assurance is number 18 that states the building where a charter is housed must meet standards for school building and facility adequacy. That's Wyoming Statute 2115-115. There's no provision in this bill that requires this building. It'll be the only one that's a public school in the state that doesn't have to meet those standards, and this building has some issues. 5 years ago, it was determined
Mr.
about
Smith,
$20 million
have you made it through
would
the
be required.
amendments you wanted to propose?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The bottom line, we've got many statewide initiatives from the governor, from the state superintendent of public instruction, from the Board of Education, from the UW College of Education, the Trustees Education Initiative, all focused on innovation statewide, and this school simply isn't necessary for that work. Let our College of Education focus statewide and work statewide, not with a single school in a building from the 1950s serving one subset of one community that is facing declining enrollment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. We'll now open public testimony. We'll have 20 minutes in opposition and 20 minutes in support. Anyone who'd like to speak in opposition to the bill, please come forward and fill the chairs. No one in the room. There is one online. Could we please bring in Ms. Bieber?
Mr. Chairman, you also have Albany County School District Superintendent online.
All right, could we bring in both? Oh, he's on the screen. All right, Mr. Goldhart.
Thank you, Chairman Andrew. Chairman Andrew and Representative, my name is John Goldhart, a citizen of Albany County and the superintendent of the Albany County School District. I oppose Senate File 0126 and urge you to oppose it as well. I oppose it for the following reasons, and these are just some of the reasons. I also want to reiterate something that was shared earlier. There is much more here than a financial threat to the district. Number one, a flawed process. I work for an elected board that believes in openness and transparency in doing the public's business. Despite requests to the primary sponsor, this proposal has only included input from a few hand-selected individuals. The process was flawed and non-transparent due to the following. The elected Albany County District Board of Trustees were never informed, involved, or given an opportunity for input. As superintendent, I was never informed or involved or given any opportunity for input. The University of Wyoming Board of Trustees were not given an opportunity for any involvement. The University of Wyoming administration was never given an opportunity for any input. The University of Wyoming College of Education was not given any opportunity for input. The University of Wyoming School University Partnership, which is the group that oversees student teachers throughout the districts in the state, was never given an opportunity to provide any input. Number two is overreach. There was little agreement between former President Ronald Reagan, who's the father of the modern conservative movement, and former Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, who was self-labeled as a New Deal liberal. However, they both had one thing in common. Both of them believed the government that functions best is the government that is closest to the people. Both the Albany County, and I add the Albany County elected Board of Trustees, and the University of Wyoming Board of Trustees voted to close the school. This is a local control issue. Passing this bill opens a very slippery slope of state government usurping the decisions made by elected board members to insert themselves into the workings of local control. I was saddened when one of our state senators gleefully stated that she was happy to once again override local control. Please not only stand up for local government and control, but hold the line. Local elected officials are not just administrators of civic trust. They are its guardians. Third, unanswered questions. The current version of this bill is confusing, is nebulous, and there are many lingering questions that have not been answered. A few of those include, do the current lab employees stay employed at the lab school, or do they have to reapply for these positions? Who hires the principal? Who evaluates the principal? Who will oversee the budgets and finances of the lab school? Who will oversee the yearly audits? The funding mechanism is also nebulous. Does our district receive the state funds and just simply pass them over? What are Albany County School District's responsibilities? Are we going to be forced to have our employees take time away from the district's 3,800 other students to complete the work for lab students? How will payroll and benefits be handled? Who will develop the pay scale for the lab employees? Who will oversee risk management? Who will oversee liability insurance? How will safety concerns be addressed with the new dormitories that are just feet away from the lab building? When will the first payment for the lab school be provided? Will it be by July 1st? Who will pay for the work that needs to be done prior to July 1st? If Albany County is mandated to provide funds, will it be reimbursed? That will require us to use reserve funds. Do you realize that if this is the case, that it will be at the cost of the teachers and staff of the 3,800 students, in that our reserves are used to pay summer payroll when there are no state payments? How will we address the inherent conflict of interest in that the contract that will be completed between ACSD and the lab school, in that there are 2 mandated seats from the Albany County School District? How do you select the parent member of the board before all students are enrolled? Will all parents have equal chance for this board seat? How will the faculty member on the board be chosen? Will it be after all teachers have been hired so that all teachers have equal opportunity? Who will decide how to enroll students and complete a lottery process? Is the legislation usurping the charter school process, and especially affecting all of those charter schools that are currently in existence that put in the time, the work, the application process, and the vetting process for their approval? Is this to usurp state statute 21-3-303B, which states that no charter shall be granted under this article if it is determined that its sole purpose
Thank you, Mr. Goldhart. Take a
delegation?
few moments to wrap up your comments. I'd appreciate it.
Lastly is declining enrollment. There are fewer school-age children in the state. We have declining enrollment in our district. We just closed an elementary school and consolidated it with another elementary school. There is more than enough room and capacity in all of our district schools to absorb the students. We also have 2 charter schools in our district. It is not fiscally prudent or sustainable to force a school to stay in place with declining enrollments and declining funding. So I would ask, if you do move this bill forward, that you make some considerations. Since this is for the entire state, then the Wyoming Department of Education should serve as the school's LEA. Since this is for the entire state, then its governing board should represent the entire state and not just Albany County. I suggest that the state superintendent be charged with selecting the board that is representative of the entire state. We urge you as a district to oppose Senate File 126. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. I believe we have one more online.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Sarah Bieber is in the room.
Thank you, Ms. Bieber.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, my name is Sarah Bieber. I'm from Casper, Wyoming. I'm testifying today in opposition of Senate File 126. I think the high points have all been hit, but I'm just want to cover a couple things. This topic came about in interim education meeting, specifically the November 14th, 2024 meeting in Cheyenne. The challenges the current lab school faces are significant and well documented. The existing lab school arrangement between the University of Wyoming and Albany County School District offers a clear preview of the challenges that this legislation would institutionalize. According to the testimony presented at the Joint Education Interim Committee meeting, the current facility requires an estimated $40 million in critical renovations just to meet basic safety and operation standards. What makes this particularly concerning is the Albany County School District currently maintains multiple facilities with available capacity for student population currently at the lab school. These facilities already meet the standards and have none of these critical safety issues. Yet instead of utilizing these existing facilities, this bill would enshrine a model requiring massive taxpayer investment. More concerning to are the documented security issues that have emerged from the current arrangement. There is evidence of multiple unreported behavioral incidences that pose serious risk to both the K-8 children and the university students. The recent construction of new residential halls adjacent to the facility has also amplified these security concerns. Yet this legislation provides insufficient guardrails to address these critical safety issues. We're talking about children. The bill before you would establish a governancing structure similar to what currently exists. It's clearly failed. It provides inadequate oversight. And despite multiple attempts and interventions, the breakdown in governance between the University of Wyoming and Albany County School District has rendered meaningless oversight. I am unwavering champion for parental rights in education and school choice. However, the lab school situation demonstrates how poorly structured programs can actually undermine these fundamental rights. Parents deserve true choice backed with transparency and accountability, not experimental programs operating without oversight and safety protocols. True educational freedom requires schools that are both operationally sound and genuinely accountable to parents. The lab school's failures to maintain basic standards of fiscal responsibility, security, and educational oversight represents exactly what we must avoid as we work to expand educational options for Wyoming families. Our children deserve better, and Wyoming parents deserve real choice they can trust. I urge you to vote no on Senate File 126. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. We will now move on to testimony in support of the bill. We have another 20 minutes for that. Anyone who wants to testify in support of the bill, please take the chairs. If you could probably try to limit your testimony to 2 or 3 minutes each, that would be helpful to everyone else who is also here to testify in support. So thank you. Good afternoon.
My name is Julia Crossland. I'm here with the unique perspective of a young teacher in Wyoming whose life was touched not long ago by the lab school. I graduated in 2023 with a degree in secondary social studies education after my pre-service student teaching program in Platte County, but I was lucky enough to be able to participate in a specially designed practicum experience through my methods program. My professor, Meredith McLaughlin, who was also a teacher at lab school simultaneously, actively modeled for us the expectations that are placed upon a classroom teacher as she balanced being a teacher and a professor. Meredith piloted a methods class that was a blend of practicum and classroom lecture that, to my understanding, is not the current format for methods classes. Being able to access the lab school was for many aspiring teachers in our class the first time they had set foot in a classroom as a teacher rather than as a student, which is a total shift in perspective. Lab has allowed us to work hands-on with students and try out different teaching styles and observe many more. It was also a reality check for many pre-service teachers who, after several years of working towards their degree, found that teaching in a classroom was not for them, rather than entering the workforce and making that discovery while trying to teach students. For others like myself, it was an opportunity to ignite a passion for teaching and to soak up knowledge like a sponge while I waited anxiously to graduate and to be able to have a classroom of my own. Rather than simply watching videos of teachers or trying to remember what it was like to be taught, we are able to gain active experience at the lab school and learn what it meant to be an effective teacher. Instead of reading what differentiation was, I was able to differentiate lessons. Instead of watching a video about classroom management, I was able to learn techniques to keep a classroom of 8th graders focused, which is not a very easy task. By allowing pre-service teachers to actively participate in the classroom, they enter the workforce much more prepared and have a better understanding of best teaching practices, which at the end of the day is what is best for kids. Teaching is something that is simply learned from being around great teachers, so it's an important factor in my decision to attend the University of Wyoming that there was a lab school and hands-on practicum experience. As an alum of the university, I feel that an expanded and improved lab school model would be beneficial in educating more great teachers, and I believe that investing in what makes teachers great will continue to contribute to the strength of education in our state. We have so many amazing, dedicated teachers in the state, and through supporting the lab school through Senate File 126 will continue to ensure that we continue to be a great state to be a student and to serve as a teacher in. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Gustav Anderson. I'm a graduate of the UW College of Education, and I'm the parent of 5 children who currently attend or have attended the UW Lab School. I'm here to share my experience and urge the committee to consider the lab school's vital role in Wyoming's educational landscape. The closure of the lab school represents a significant loss for Wyoming and dramatically reduces parental choice and freedom in education. Our voices of parents have not been heard by ACSD1. Students across Wyoming deserve access to robust, varied, and engaging educational opportunities. This isn't just a local issue about Laramie. UW Education graduates, like myself, we benefited from the lab school's unique learning environment. We go on to teach throughout the state, and we bring with us the innovative teaching practices and the solid foundation that we gain at lab. My own experience as an undergraduate at UW solidified this for me. In many of my education courses, we regularly visited the lab school to observe exceptional teaching and learning in action. One of the most remarkable aspects was how seamlessly the lab school students accepted these observations as part of their learning. The presence of observers was normalized, allowing classes to proceed uninterrupted, displaying the dynamic and engaging nature of the education provided. This is a special and valuable experience. While the placement of UW teachers across Wyoming during their final year is widely understood, the critical role of the lab school in teacher preparation in freshman through sophomore years is often overlooked. It provides invaluable opportunities for education majors, as well as students and faculty from other university departments, to observe, interact with, and learn from the exceptional teachers and the unique educational environment that the lab school fosters. This experience is essential for developing highly qualified teachers. All of our children, UW education majors, and parents deserve the opportunity to benefit from this unique and exceptional school. And the lab school is more than just a school. It's an institution that has played a crucial role in educational acceptance in Wyoming. It is a vital entity that protects educational freedom and innovation. The lab school develops best practices, trains future teachers, and provides educational choice for all of Wyoming. Greatness is often forged through challenge, and it's worth fighting for. Please fight for our children, for their educational freedom, and for the future teachers of Wyoming, and for the future of our state by supporting the UW Lab School. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? All right, thank you. Good afternoon.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, my name is John Wilford. I'm the parent of a third grader at the UW Lab School and a longtime instructor at the University of Wyoming. Please accept the standard caveat that my comments do not necessarily represent those of the university, but are informed by my experience as a lab school parent and a longtime educator there. About 4 years ago, we chose the UW Lab School as the educational path for our entering kindergartner because we best believed that it fit what we valued in a potential educational experience for our child. Some of the noteworthy benefits in our family thought process were, number one, an integrated education that provided the ability to learn and practice various required subject areas using real-world, often Wyoming-centered topics in a way that allows students to search for knowledge rather than simply being told about it. As an educator, I know that increased mastery and retention comes with actively seeking information. When given the curricular flexibility to approach coursework in this manner, UW Lab has a stellar reputation at creating an amazing learning environment that allows students to truly care about their education while still readily meeting the state standards. This opportunity was central in our choice as parents for UW Lab. Number two, the appeal of having more potential teachers at all levels in the classroom with our child was another key factor in our choice. We had the understanding that many College of Education students had opportunities to help out in the UW Lab School classrooms. This enhanced support network gave us comfort in knowing that there would be more potential guidance and help for our child within the classroom. The thought of having more one-on-one human connections while learning to read or applying difficult math or investigating a complex issue in a meaningful way was a significant draw. Number three, as lifelong Wyoming residents and long-term members of the UW community, my wife and I love the mission of the UW Lab School in helping train Wyoming's next generation of teachers within a strong College of Education. The in-class interactions that I mentioned above don't just help my child. They help the education majors as well. Whether it be the chance to practice educational theory from their coursework, or to find the gaps in their knowledge and skill set as a future teacher that still need development, or to truly experience the attention span and energy level of an 8-year-old. Along with observing how an experienced teacher might manage that. All of these are valuable outcomes. Getting this insight earlier in their educational career, long before student teaching, is of vital importance for a variety of reasons. One noteworthy one is a long-term advisor. I'll note that there are some that'll find that this isn't their right path, and they'll change their focus in education or potentially their major earlier on in their career, saving valuable time and money. Waiting until student teaching as a senior to make a discovery of that magnitude is frankly too late. Within each of these benefits, we understood as a family that there were potential risks involved. Sometimes truly novel educational approaches fall flat or don't work out as expected, but sometimes they're compelling, engaging, and feel like magic to the learner. Sometimes extra classroom support doesn't create an additive effect, but sometimes a collective spark can be lit for both my child and the helper as they work together as a project. We as a family chose the UW Lab School because of the potential for engagement, real-life application of course content, and outstanding instruction that we knew would resonate with our child as a learner and as a person. With proper support, flexibility, and vision, we can continue to have this wonderful resource that supports all of Wyoming education. Please support Senate File 0126. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Will you please go online? I think we have one on there, then we'll come back to the room.
Mr. Chairman, I have invited Sylvia Fonfara to join the room. Looks like she's joining right now.
Hi, is everyone able to hear me?
We can hear you.
Excellent. I wish I could be there to testify in person, but I'm really sick at the moment. So thank you for having an option to testify remotely. I appreciate being able to speak despite this dang fever. My name is Sylvia Grace Fonfara. Thank you all again for taking the time to listen to your constituents regarding to UW Lab School in its time of need. One of the best decisions my parents ever made was to send me to the lab school, and many alumni share this view because our school went above and beyond to set us up for success, not just as learners, but as human beings ready to take on the challenges of adulthood. The head start on life children gain from schools that teach real-world skills alongside standardized content is priceless beyond measure. This is one of many reasons your constituents are so upset about the lab school coming under attack. This school has spent the last century developing and demonstrating highly effective ways to give kids a truly comprehensive education, and instead of being honored as the world-class role model it is, the lab school is on life support in the legislature because of administrative squabbles over solvable problems. I am deeply concerned about the precedent this bill's failure would set, which would allow a limited number of people in administrative and, more concerningly, elected positions to ignore the over 1,000 people across the state of Wyoming who have spoken at public hearings, signed petitions, and sent countless emails in support of the lab school over the last several years. Yes, this bill has significant issues that must be addressed, but your job as elected officials is to represent your constituents, not organizations actively choosing to reject us. By letting Senate File 0126 fail, you would be enabling and empowering school districts and elected officials to do whatever they want, regardless of the needs and wishes of the community they serve. This is dangerous, and I strongly urge you to consider the damage you would be doing to the rule of law by allowing this bill to die. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we'll go back to the room. Good afternoon.
Hello. Hello, Chairman, representatives. Thank you for supporting education in Wyoming. I'm a parent asking you to vote in favor of SF 126, and I'd like to speak on parent choice and on local control. As a parent, I am really familiar with my own children's social emotional needs and learning needs. And as a family, this is why we chose the UW Lab School for both of our kids. This school really fosters a love of learning, and it comes via an infrastructure that the school has and a culture that the school has that's not replicated at the other district schools. And it's partly because of its connection to the university. There are many student-driven, project-based learning that happens there. My children are excited to go to school every day. My son was one who emailed you about his country presentation project that he was so excited about. And I love that my kids feel like the university campus is a place where they belong, and it makes it more likely that college is in their future, which is what I want for them. Lab also emphasizes leadership across grade levels, which really benefits both our introspective third grader and our enthusiastic kindergartner. And all of these benefits are also, by the way, things that observing education students get to see up close and firsthand. And they can take that back to the schools that they practice in, hopefully in the state. So I'm really devastated at the prospect that this choice might be taken away from me. And I know many, many parents feel the same. I support local control, but in this case, unfortunately, it has really failed. The university did not survey students, faculty, or staff about the lab school's removal. In fact, the UW student governing body passed a resolution on December 3rd in support of the presence of the lab school on campus, and the Board of Trustees ignored that. As a parent, also, I have repeatedly voiced concerns to both the university and the school district. The few who met with me nodded along, but took no action. And more often, my emails and calls have been ignored. Many ACSD1 board members failed to respond during the single week that the community was given to provide input on the school's closure in December. And when concerns were acknowledged, there was no plan given to address them. And yet, the school district voted to close the school anyway. So my supposed civic guardians really have betrayed my trust here. I don't feel heard by the university. I don't feel heard by the district, but I do feel hopeful about this bill. SF 126 really corrects a big problematic issue, which is that lab's own leadership, current teachers, the current principal, the former principal of 17 years who now works at the College of Education, they were all excluded from all negotiations about the future of the school, and no input was sought from those that are impacted by lab's removal from campus. But this bill ensures that the governance includes the College of Education, members of the district, and lab representatives. I think lab's existence isn't just a local matter. It impacts the entire state. It's really a vital training ground for future teachers that supplements good practices that are going on, but those supplements are needed. And you all have the power to preserve this institution that's over 135 years old. That's a century's worth long. So I ask you to please vote yes on SF 126. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? All right, we have about 4-5 minutes left. If the last two at the table would try to split that evenly, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I'll be brief because I don't want to reiterate what's already been said. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity. My name is Bradley Rettler, and I have 2 kids who attend the lab school. I drop them off most mornings, and it, up until this year, was incredibly rare to see fewer than 4 adults in the room, 1 teacher, and then 3 to 5 freshmen or sophomores from the College of Education who had just dropped in because they didn't have class and they wanted to hang out with the kids. They would very often participate in science projects, they would lead reading groups, they would show up for recess and play, they would eat lunch with the students. These are teachers, future teachers who are not yet going up for student teaching, but who just want some experience in the classroom. It's been 13 years since they've been in kindergarten, and they remember it from a kindergartner's perspective, not from an adult's perspective. And so having that is really important. This is, I think, one main reason why this matters to you and not just to Albany County. I also teach at the university, and in my intro level classes, I'll ask students, why are you here? Why did you choose the University of Wyoming? And number 1, Hathaway Scholarship, for sure. Number 2, for education majors, is always the lab school. There's a school on campus next to me where I'm taking my classes that I can go observe and be involved and get that practice early. That is keeping our Wyoming students in the state and then sending them back out into the state for student teaching and sending them back out in the state to teach. So all of you have schools in your district. Hopefully, all of the teachers there went to the University of Wyoming. That's what we want. We want our teachers to have grown up in the state, to go to college in the state, and to stay in the state. The lab school is one of the things that keeps them in the state. And so I would urge you to vote in favor of SF 126.
Thank you. Ms. Brand?
There, okay. I'll make this quick because I think Meredith is very important to hear. But as a Wyoming small business owner and a parent, I urge you to keep lab school and support 126. There are but a few lab schools. And I want to point out something unique. As an owner of a business, I want to point out that My business over the last 120 years has contributed more than $100,000 in property taxes alone. And those go directly to the county school district. My small business has paid over the past 20 years $100,000 in sales and use taxes. So where am I going with this? In my loosey-goosey creative math, I've paid 20% of $1 million. Why do I point that out to you today? Because last year, $1 million was spent on Albany County School District 1 central administration alone. $500,000 was spent on instruction and curriculum. So I want to also segue into, over the past 3 decades, I take senior group photo at the Laramie High School. It's called the Laramie High Plainsman Spirit Photograph. And the number of students fluctuates just a slight bit. So why am I seeing now more principals at the high school when I've been told that the enrollment numbers are dropping? And why am I also seeing an assistant superintendent? So I just urge you to be fiscally responsible. I urge you to know that small businesses are the backbone of our state economy, and they're what pay for community education. All 3 of my kids went to lab school for 14 contiguous years. I believe that the state of Wyoming needs a laboratory school. They need observational situations for their undergrads. They need hands-on learning. It's a state laboratory school. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Could you give
Thank
us
you.
maybe a 1 minute?
I'll do my
comment?
fastest here.
Thank you. I'm
I'm
sorry.
Meredith McLaughlin, a 24-year veteran teacher at UW Lab School. I speak as a parent because my 3 boys got the benefit of going to the lab school, and I believe every parent should have the option and every child should have the option of what my kids had. But mostly today, I speak for Ruth Adsit. You're going to see her picture on the back of this handout coming to you. In 1906, she came and started a summer training program. And the purpose was to serve the land grant institution mission and attract more teachers from Wyoming into teaching. So she started this little summer training program. In it, you're going to see some of the children of University of Wyoming's founders and student teachers. And I bring this picture up because this school that she started and this training program that she started in 1906 was so successful that parents in 1906 did exactly what you heard these parents do today. You heard them advocate for decision makers to make this a statewide model. When I walked into that school in 2001, it was still Ruth Adsit's vision of a school, and it is a school that served Wyoming for 100 years before it was the fish riding the bicycle that it became when ACSD took over as a way of handling some funding issues. It's time for this fish to swim in a river that serves all of Wyoming. There are so many opportunities here for this school to work in partnership with UW's already good programs and help create the very best kind of teachers for children all over the state. I am concerned right now because I supervise student teachers for the University of Wyoming around the state, and I have taught them as practicum students for 2 decades now. They are lacking experiences with students in the classroom. It is the number one thing that I hear from them. This is, I think Representative Lally has said this. Can we imagine nurses going out and not being trained? Do we want that? We are not looking for less or enough opportunities to train teachers. We need more and as many as are possible. So I encourage you, there's more in here than I said, but I actually want to read one thing that Ruth Adsit said in 1909 when she was talking at a statewide education conference to parents and to public educators. And I just want you to see if this sounds familiar today. She was concerned then that public schools had school systems devoid of moral character. Does that sound familiar? She was concerned, Ruth Adsit was, that there were teachers who taught only for a paycheck and felt that their job was to trod students mercilessly through irrelevant content rather than engage them in joyful learning and what she called soulful instruction. She was concerned about an assessment system that had lost its accountability to children in the name of one-size-fits-all efficiency. She was concerned about a failure of schools to inspire citizenship and service to their communities and a breakdown of the relationship between parents and teachers. Her 1909 advice could not be more relevant in this legislative session. To render the greatest possible service to the child, there must be harmony between the home and the school. The school should be an extension of home, and the teacher should supplement the effort of parents. There should be constant striving to open and enlarge and keep clear many channels of communication and interest between the parents and teachers. Parents should feel free to approach the teacher at any time with any suggestion or criticism which they feel sure would benefit their child. Teachers should welcome these parents and give them a sympathetic hearing, respect their confidence, and be thankful that it exists. We cannot have ideal schools without the hearty cooperation of parents. I am
All right.
proud to have been part of a
Thank you.
school that has lived this since its beginning.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Is there any questions? Thank you. Public testimony is now closed. Committee, what is your pleasure? Moved by Representative Strzok, seconded by Representative Guggenwas. Senator Rothfuss, would you like to come work the bill with us?
Absolutely.
Like a chance to respond to any questions you think we might still have
Well,
out there.
I would say, first of all, I do have a response to every concern that was raised, but you probably don't want to all hear them right now. If you do have any specific ones, please ask me. But yes, I appreciate the concerns, and we've worked through those concerns. One that I did want to briefly mention related to local control and how this process played out. I think it's really important to realize this is a University of Wyoming school that we worked through the school district because that was how the funding model works. Now, if the school district really doesn't want to participate in this, honestly, I think we should find a way to let them opt out. And I think that's fair, but I don't think that's in the best interest of the students, the school, the university, our future educators, or anyone else. So I hope we can find some common ground there. But the concern I have is really this school, the lab school, has struggled for the past 5 years. So when people are being asked, is this working? And the answer is no, from an educator education standpoint, that's an accurate answer. That's fair. That's why the College of Education comes back and says, yeah, this isn't really benefiting us. But the idea of just throwing out a 138-year-old institution instead of fixing it is the concern I have. And the university opted to throw it out. The delegation representing the people duly elected wanted to try and find a way to fix it. And again, from the control standpoint, from the representation standpoint, it is up to us. This is a state institution, and I think we should find a way to fix it. If we close it, it's done. We're not going to reverse this decision. But we certainly have an incredible opportunity to make it even more than it's ever been before. And I'd ask for your support to join me in helping do that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any amendments? No amendments. Is there any discussion on the bill? Representative Strzok.
I just have a comment. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I just think we need to remember, it reminds me of the rural schools in a sense. We fight for them. School districts usually want to close them and parents get out there fight. This is no different. It's not, I don't look as a local control per se. It's parents fighting for something and some teachers. And it's very similar listening. I may have gotten it wrong, but very similar to some of our rural schools. I find it very important that we get out and these students that are going on to be teachers get a chance to be in the room long before their junior, senior year. I think every aspect of our world should work this way. You spend a lot of money and then you get out there and you're like, oh my goodness, I don't like this. And so I think it's very important they get a chance to be in there. It sounds like, it's beneficial for the children. They get these extra younger people in there working with them. A lot of hands-on, that's very important. And I think it's something that we really should fight for. Thank you.
Representative Bratton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have a question as somebody who's been, was a former teacher, went through the College of Education. When I went to my university, we did certainly have opportunities to go out to schools starting when we were sophomores, as soon as you were in the School of Education. So I would be surprised, I would want to know if the local school district, the Albany, public schools don't have those same opportunities, or certainly should be looking to work with the university and provide those opportunities for our young aspiring teachers to get out there in the classroom. Can you speak to that at all?
Senator Rothfuss.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, they do. There's no question that all of the schools in the district and schools elsewhere in other districts are engaged with the university, and there is that opportunity. As you heard, though, it's a little bit different being in a laboratory school environment where you have a seamless interaction and you can go in for 15 minutes, do an observation, go back to the classroom, talk about it. You haven't disrupted the students because they're used to a steady flow, and you literally have 1,000 of those contacts in a year. You can't really do that with one of our other schools in the district. That takes a lot of planning. There's no parking on campus to begin with, right? So even the parking aspect of it all by itself is going to add a significant amount of time. So there's a difference in what you can achieve having a co-located school that's a laboratory school versus reaching out into the school district and partnering. That will still continue to happen, right? There's nothing about this effort would discourage those types of practicum engagement, but you have so much more when you co-located and you can just have those direct interactions at any point, which is how it operated when it was thriving for many years.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is really a unique issue. The groundswell of support I've seen to maintain and to reinvent the lab school is not like anything I've seen on any issue. As we get hundreds of emails for and against everything, this has been very, very one-sided from the public. So the issue I think we're looking at here is a groundswell of public support and voter support for an institution they love that has been falling apart. So you can tell I'm on the fence here. But this is too large of an issue with too much public input and too many people paying attention, I think, for this committee to shut it down at this moment. So I'll probably vote to pass it on because this deserves its time in the House.
Vice Chair Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Rothfuss, I believe we had testimony during the interim that for 5 years, the school hasn't functioned basically as a lab school. So talk about that a little bit, because honestly, the breaking of that continuity, and we speak of what used to be as if it's happening now, and that's not the impression I've gotten. So could you straighten that out for me?
Senator Rothfuss.
Representative, the operation was really thriving under prior administration, prior principal. There was relatively seamless interaction, and there was flexibility over and control over those placements, bringing in students. It was between the school and the College of Education, so it worked relatively seamlessly. In recent years, the desire by the school district to control the curriculum, to basically take it out of the hands of the school and change things to a more unified effort, a diminishment of resources going to the school. That was part of the cause of the concern for the university. The university got to the point where it didn't feel like it was a lab school anymore, and they said it was basically a public school that happened to be on the university campus. And that seemed to be the case. Shutting down access, coordinating the access centrally through the district, there were a lot of concerns that were raised that it really did diminish that feature of it where it was acting as a lab school. It was still a great public school. Don't get me wrong, students were being educated, they were being educated well. But from the university's perspective, and this is not inaccurate, right? The university had concerns that they weren't getting what they wanted out of the lab school. Now, when I heard those concerns during the interim, we tried to bring it back, right? Fix those concerns, address those concerns, and the university was not interested in fixing it. It was interested in abandoning it, right? That's the fundamental difference. But again, it isn't difficult to get back to the point where you have that seamless coordination. You just have engagement between the school, you have the flexibility and freedom, you get back to the school choice concept that we're all, very empowered by, and get it to the point where the school and the College of Education can go back to working seamlessly and rebuild that relationship. Having it report to the Joint Education Committee, I think, is an important part of building that, because we'll find out if it's happening, and we'll get back to ideally the 1,000 contacts per year. That's a big deal.
Vice Chair Lally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is part of my concerns. Kind of, it begins with this idea that this hasn't been functioning this way for 5 years, basically. And so it's not like we're going to do something and all that's going to come back together. So there's been this period where it's basically functioned as a good public school, but not a lab school. I think that's important for everyone to keep in mind. And I'm thinking here, what I'm seeing is we have testimony from the university that they do not want to operate a lab school anymore. And speaking for the Department of Education as well, that they don't want that. So we're seemingly forcing parties, and the district doesn't want it, but we're sort of making them do it. And that bothers me a little bit. I have heard these parents, I actually, the testimony in the interim was very compelling as well. Some of the children were able to come. And it was compelling. No question, this is a very difficult decision. But I just see it as there's no lab school for the last 5 years, and we're going to come in and force under some concept of parental choice, which I get too, but we're trying to use these principles of the charter schools, which I support, but not really all the requirements of a charter school. So it's this hybrid that I'm really having trouble, honestly, getting my head around how it functions. So maybe you can help with that, but also, where is the accountability then?
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Lally, there's a few questions in that. First of all, getting to whether the university wants it or not. At this moment in time, it was failing and it wasn't valuable to them, and that's fair. You look at the history, though, and you look at the idea of throwing out an institution that's 138 years old, and do we empower an appointed board of trustees to make that decision without public input? Or do we get involved? Right? And in my view, that is a legislative decision. It is. We are electeds, and this is a decision that should be made by electeds. And I understand that they gave their recommendation. And I understand that the College of Education was not getting value out of it and said they weren't getting value out of it. They're not here today saying, please close down the lab school. And believe me, they thrived with the lab school for many years. I've been on this committee for 15 years. I've been at the university for longer than that, and I've worked with the education, and I know how well previous deans respected and thrived with the lab school. So I saw it under the good times. The folks that are around today that are making the decision at the university haven't been around long enough to have seen the good times, candidly. They weren't here for that. They didn't watch that show. And so from my perspective, again, as a representative of that district, but also senator for the state of Wyoming, I'm going to reflect on what I've seen and recognize that as an elected, I do get to step in when appointed folks that haven't had the same experience I had are trying to end an institution that's been around for 138 years. I think that's our role. I do. Now, as far as the accountability side of it, that's where the Joint Education Committee comes in, and I think it's handy. They still have to do all their testing. They still have to abide by everything that a standard school does. So the accountability is there built into the Wyoming Accountability and Education Act. They're going to adhere to all of that. But that second layer of accountability, us, the state of Wyoming, the Joint Education Committee, saying, we want to make sure that you're fulfilling the mission. And we want you to report to us every year on that mission and tell us how it's going. That's what will allow us to see whether it's getting back or not. And if it proves to be inaccurate, nothing stops us from closing it down later and saying this failed. Nothing stops us from doing that. But I can assure you, if we close it down now, we don't have the choice in the future to reopen it. Right? I mean, I think everyone would probably agree, this is a one-way process. When it closes, it doesn't get opened again. So we can try this experiment, and if 4 or 5 years from now, it turns out that I was just wildly inaccurate and we failed miserably and this school did not achieve any of the objectives, then I will humbly come before you. I will apologize for wasting all of your time, but I just don't think that's going to happen.
All right, thank you. Further discussion? Representative Braden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Boy, as far as the accountability, I mean, there is a lot of verbiage in here that is pretty gray. Coordinated effort that I would want to find, level of engagement, impact on the school, proposed statutory modifications. But, you know, fundamentally, I would like to see this as a charter. And Representative Lawley said it, it's such a strange hybrid. It's hard to administer. If it could be under the charter provision, I think there might be a path. But I agree with the sponsor. It sounds like that is problematic. And I do worry about the precedent that we're setting with the legislature involving ourselves in this and the potential constitutional issue. So, I mean, it sounds like such a unique school, but it puts us as legislators, I think, in a problematic position. So I'm gonna have to vote no on this.
Thank you. Is that a question? Okay, further discussion.
Sorry.
Representative Erickson.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't downplay the merits. I think this is great, and having gone through this myself in student teaching and the process there, you know, I think this has had some great things happening. I recruited teachers directly from that had participated in this. But I too worry that we're out of our lane in this legislatively. I think that we just need to revert back to the local control, and even though there's question as to whether or not that's existed, I still think this could be a very top-down decision if we continue with that. So those are my concerns.
Senator Rothfuss.
Can I address those two concerns? So from that standpoint, the local school board never had the capacity to decide to keep the school open. That is inaccurate. They said they voted to close it. They couldn't have voted to keep it open. It wasn't a local decision. There was never a local decision made. This was a university unilateral decision by an appointed board. Now, it turns out that after the fact, once they started running numbers, ACSD 1 decided, all right, well, yeah, we're happy with this. It looks like the math works out. We get some funds back and we close one of those pesky schools of choice. And that's fair, but it was never a local control decision. Not for a minute. It was decided by the University Board of Trustees and the administration of the university, unilaterally, without public comment, at a meeting in Sheridan, not in Laramie. Yes, that's when it happened. The decision was made. So I'd encourage you to not think of this as a local control decision where a local control process took place, and we're trying to thwart that. That didn't take place. With regard to the university, we are the elected body that oversees the university and tells it to implement programs. It doesn't want to implement this program. The School of Energy Resources was a program it didn't want to implement when I was early in the legislature. They fought that, they resisted that, they got that. It's probably the most successful institution at the University of Wyoming, and it was the legislature that made that decision. We separated it out of the budget. We gave it a board to oversee it and govern it, and that has been an incredible decision. So we told the university what to do at that point. That's our job. We're the electeds. We are the local control of the University of Wyoming, and if the local school board needs to get out of this because you feel uncomfortable telling the local school board what to do, okay, let's amend it. That's fine. I mean, if that's really the concern. I again, don't think that's helpful for the students. But the directive here is to the University of Wyoming to keep a university institution in existence. It's been around for 138 years, and it is literally our job to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I do have one small amendment that I forgot earlier. On page 12, line 17, I want to strike 2024 to 2025 and put 2023 to 2024. And I'd like confirmation from the sponsor that I'm doing this in the right place. But the purpose of this would be to have the funding of the school be based on when students were actually going there and not in the last year where they've lost a significant number of students after the announcement of the closure. I think that might cause problems for them.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that would do that, and I think that's reasonable. The enrollment dropped by about 80 students, I think, after the announcement to close it was going to take place.
Thank you. Page 12, line 17, it just brings back the date to where we're gonna consider the population. Do you have a second on that?
A second.
Seconded by Representative Strzok. All right, discussion. You're voting on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Amendment is adopted. All right, we are voting on House Bill Senate File 126. Please call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, on Senate File 126, establishment of a K-8 public lab school do pass as amended. Representative Bratton.
No.
Representative Erickson.
No.
Representative Guggenmoss has left an absentee vote of aye. Representative Kelly.
Aye.
Representative Lawley has left an absentee vote of no. Representative Singh has left an absentee vote of aye. Representative Strzok.
Aye.
Representative Williams has left an absentee vote of no. Chairman Andrew.
Aye.
5 aye, 4 no.
The bill passes the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Senate File 162 is now on the table for our consideration. Senator Scott. Let's go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I bring you Senate File 162 on the amendment to the educational block grant. What this does, Mr. Chairman, is make the portion of the block grant that is for teachers and benefits for teachers a separate categorical grant within the block grant. And the provisions are that school districts could move money into that portion of the block grant from elsewhere in the block grant, but they can't move it from the teachers to the rest of the block grant. 3 reasons for bringing this. First is that what the teachers do is really the fundamental part of what a school system does. They're the ones that actually teach the students, and so they're the ones that are engaging in the primary mission. So it makes sense to have them isolated and especially protected. Second, there was, when I came back to the Education Committee after a considerable absence, we were dealing with the last attempt at recalibration. And there was vast controversy that there were clearly a large number of teachers who were funded in the model, but were not present. They were talked of as ghost teachers. And the money for their salaries and benefits was going elsewhere. And there was a great deal of dispute of where the elsewhere was. I had another senator made a project of going through the Crew report, which is difficult, Mr. Chairman, to put it bluntly, but he succeeded. And the answer we got back was some of it was going to better funding teachers, so that it was just being moved around within the teacher part. And some of it was going to other activities within the school districts activities, specifically the activities part, and administration, and then various other things all over the district funding. So the dispute, factional dispute within the legislature had been, no, it's all going to teachers, no, it's all going to administration or sports or something. There's truth in both of them, Mr. Chairman, was what we found. The third reason is that there was considerable experience that when somebody proposed a reform that a local administration didn't like, they instantly told the teachers, well, if this passes, we're going to have to cut teachers. It was just a knee-jerk reaction because it was the most important thing the districts did. And I think some of those threats might have been carried out. There was clearly a risk of it. And that was an obstacle, and this does put a stop to that. So that's a very quick summary of the bill. When you look at the bill, the first paragraph starting at the bottom on line 14 of page 1 and carrying over, that's what makes this a categorical block grant. The Senate did modify the start date until the year after the recalibration. The thought was, the leadership was telling us, get it in place before recalibration. And the thought was, with that being known, then the recalibration would focus on getting the figures right. And I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of the mechanics of things. So that was the change. It had been picked up from a previous bill that just started it the next year, and we changed that. There's a set of exceptions on page 2, starting on line 9. Basically, they're very small districts, schools, and some other odd things like virtual schools that just don't fit the model. And so we put an exception there, and you can read that. And then item C is where you can move money into the teacher part of the block grant. Districts can, so they can deal with that if there's a need to, and I think some of them probably will. But you cannot move money from teachers to other purposes. Keep it focused on the fundamentals that the schools do. The rest of the bill is some studying and reporting, some of which will occur this October and be useful in the recalibration, Mr. Chairman. So that's one of the reasons the effective date stays the way it is. And most of that, I think, will be done from existing information that's already in the State Department of Education. So, Mr. Chairman, that's a quick summary of the bill and the reasons for it. And what motivated it coming this time was we're preparing for the recalibration when all those issues are going to be in play.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We just recently talked in a bill about the districts having that 30% reserve wiggle room. And by divvying up grants in this manner, how might this affect the district's 30% budget reserve? Might they be calibrating 30% of a smaller number?
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, that will depend on how the statute is written after the recalibration. I would hope that they would construe that broadly because I think those reserves are useful, but it would depend on how we did the statute following the recalibration.
Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, can you tell us a little bit about efforts that may have been tried before to tighten up these ghosts? Or is this the first stab at that? And
Senator Scott.
Those efforts were a major portion of the controversy between the House and the Senate at the last recalibration. And we were unable to get to a resolution. And one of the things that went wrong was the federal government dumped a 300 million stimulus program. As I remember it, they dumped it on the day the recalibration, Senate version of the recalibration bill was on second reading. And the House and the Senate had different interpretations of what that meant. And when they finally, because they had a maintenance of effort requirement, which was understandable, and a maintenance of effort requirement that nobody understood. And it turned out the House and the Senate had different interpretations of that. Turned out we were both wrong. Because when the feds finally figured it out, it was entirely different. And for those reasons, we were unable to reach a conclusion on the last recalibration. That was one of the principal things, but the dispute over the ghost teachers was one of them. And I think this will largely remove that particular obstacle, getting a recalibration done.
Further, Representative Erickson.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, Mr. Chairman. You talked about how some situations have happened where that money that was meant for teachers actually went into administration. I mean, is there documented, does that happen on a regular basis, or is that an anomaly?
As I understand what the senator who worked through the crew report was, once you're within the block grant, you can't trace, oh, they moved this slush fund to administration and this one to the activities sports program and that one to something else. There were a number of funds that were deliberately being underfunded or were overfunded in the model. The ghost teachers was one source. The health insurance, both for those teachers and only one of the districts used the state insurance system, mine actually, in Casper. And the rest use a system that's cheaper, and that produces surplus revenue. The CTE monies were being rated. There were a number of things. And it's hard to say which was going to which one. But clearly, in some of the districts, the teachers were being shorted, and there was more being spent on activities in particular and administration. The teachers, some of the teachers that we talked to were concentrating on the administration feature. Probably the activities end was more important. But in all those movements, you can't say this piece went to there and that piece went to here. It all just goes into a common pot and they reallocate it. So they were shorting some districts, and other districts looked like they were paying the teachers, and almost universally were paying the teachers more than the model provides. And that, Mr. Chairman, is something we need to fix in the recalibration. We need to get back to reality, or what ought to be a reality. But a good part of the districts were using some of the funds for that purpose. So it was very much a mixed bag. You couldn't say that all was going here or all was going there.
Further questions? Representative Braden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question on page 2, lines 2 to 3. I printed off the attachment A that shows the bill refers to, I want to know exactly what teachers are covered under the bill. I mean, I think it just covers core teachers and specialist teachers. So I just want to double check about the instructional facilitators and the tutors and the CTE and the substitutes.
The instructions I gave the drafting attorney were that we wanted just the teachers and not the instructional facilitators, the classroom aides, all librarians, all those things. In the past, that has sometimes been controversial. That let's keep it to just the teachers. That's a clean, simple version that everybody can understand.
Thank you.
further questions? Seeing none, thank you. The department, like to comment on this bill? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Dickie Shaner, speaking on behalf of Superintendent Degenfelder, and I am joined by Leslie Zimmerscheid, who is our school foundation team supervisor, also known as the master of the funding model. So the superintendent does not have a position on this bill other than to make one suggestion in hope of a possible amendment that benefits be taken out of this sort of exclusion. It's really administratively burdensome on the department and the school districts to try to figure out how to do this if benefits are included. So we'd respectfully ask that it just be salaries for the teachers that is in this exclusion in this bill. And then another thing we just wanted to point out too is we ran some numbers, and if you look at subsection B on page 2, line 9 through 15, with those exclusions, excluding alternative schools, schools that have virtual programs, the small schools, charter schools, you're looking at about 159 of 342 schools, so about 47% would be excluded by our calculation. So just food for thought as you're working the bill, and open to any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No questions. Thank you. Let's see. We only have enough of us for a quorum. I'm inclined to keep working this bill considering what we have on the floor, but if anyone objects, I think that'll be just fine. We could continue it to the next meeting. Are we fine to keep working it? All right. All right. We will accept. Who's here to testify on this bill? Just two. Okay. All right. I probably won't categorize it. We'll just take 15 minutes of public testimony. Please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Tate Mullen, Government Relations Director for the Wyoming Education Association. First and foremost, I do appreciate the idea that we want to benefit our teachers. I think that we can all agree that that's something that we can all get behind. However, there are some significant concerns with this bill, and we would ask you to oppose this effort. The funding model is just that. It is a funding model. It's not a spending model. And so those dollars are allocated to districts, and those districts determine where that need is within those schools, and they allocate and they spend appropriately. So the necessity for utilizing a block grant, first and foremost, is because of the failure to adopt a recalibration for quite some time. As is, the model starting salaries are roughly $40,000. Our salary book, that's going to vary across districts, but the reality on the ground is that the actual starting salaries are roughly in the low 50s. So without adopting a recalibration, this has necessitated districts to have the ability to fund what is needed within their specific districts. Largely, this has been a shift to provide dollars for our educators in an effort to attract and retain. What we have seen within the model, because we haven't passed a recalibration, is we've got about a 20% difference, right? So districts hire 20% fewer teachers, but 20% of those dollars then go to teachers to attract and retain. This is the idea of ghost teachers. All districts are doing is making sure that they have the funds necessary to attract and retain educators. So pulling salaries out of the model significantly hampers districts' ability to make those necessary adjustments. If they're pulling, if the idea is that we're pulling from other places to make that up now that we've made this a categorical grant, we're compounding this problem. So now we're pulling from these areas that we are concerned about, CTE, all of these other areas in the model, instead of shifting that 20% and 20%. There isn't a district out there that could hire at $40,000 a year. Finally, I believe there is a universal agreement amongst legislators and stakeholders I like that we need to go through this recalibration process, of which the Wyoming Education Association is happy to work with you all and stand by and eager to help. But with us doing this prior to recalibration, this is putting the cart before the horse. We do need to have conversations in recalibration. We do need to make sure that it is evidence-based, that it is a cost-based model, and then we can have discussions about what that should look like. This is not the time nor the place for this effort, and I urge you to vote against this. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Kirk Schmidt. I live in Lander, and I'm retired now, but for 38 years, I was a finance director in K-12 education. And I was very involved in the development of the current funding model as I was in the prior ones. So let me just talk about the actual data that's used to calibrate everything. Today, right now, the average base salary for teachers in the state of Wyoming across 48 school districts, the average is $51,734. The salary that's used in the funding model for teachers, for beginning teachers, is $40,652. That's $11,000 difference that districts are putting into teacher salaries at the base level. As they move across in the funding model, experience and education, that gap gets wider. The funding model doesn't keep up with school district salary schedules. The author talked about the Crew report. This is data that's out there. The Crew report hasn't been updated for a couple of years, but if you look at the Crew report, it shows the average of all salaries in a school district versus of the average salaries in the funding model. 2 years ago, that average of all salaries of teachers was over $6,500, more than was in the funding model. So the notion that school districts are robbing from teacher salaries to pay administrators or anybody else just doesn't bear up to the facts. The reports that are mentioned on page 2, lines 4 and 5, I won't bore you with the details, but there are 3 separate reports that school districts report to WDE. WD 601 is the annual district report. That is expenditure detail, and it drills down to each building level. So teachers' salaries and benefits by building are in that report. The 602, which is used to populate the funding model, is by employee. Every employee is in there. Their wages are listed. They're listed what grade level they're teaching. If it's a teacher, they list the building. It is granular information. The 652 is the spring report of that, and that reports in total. The 602 is just what is contracted. What do you anticipate? The 652 at the end of the year is what did you really pay that employee? So there's enough information out there right now. So the reporting requirement in here is overkill. You already have that data. When you read the funding model that was adopted in 2005, Dr. Pikus's report, I'm going to read 3 sentences out of this report that talks about how the model is supposed to be interpreted. It says, as Wyoming policymakers know, school finance issues and structures are constantly changing. The key role for the state is to determine the appropriate level of resources for each school and each school district and devise a cost-based method, a recalibrated grant, for allocating the funds to the district. Districts must then allocate these resources to schools in a way that ensures each school has adequate dollars for meeting the needs of the school. When you look at the block grant, there's a prototypical school. Okay, it's a prototype. It says we have 300 kids, we have this many teachers, we have this many custodians. It is a prototype that came from gathering of data throughout the whole state. And Dr. Pikus testified to the Joint Committee at the time that Wyoming had one of the best financial reporting systems of education in the United States. So we're very proud, and and that system has kept going. But it's an average. That's what a prototype is. Here's the average. Every school district has a different delivery system of education. Every one of the schools in your district do what they're doing, and it's different between counties. That's what the prototype is. There's going to have more teachers, fewer teachers, more. It is up to the local school board, and that's why this report was written in there. It's a funding mechanism. It's not an expenditure model. It provides the resources, and then it's up to the local boards to allocate those resources. There's a lot of data out there, Mr. Chairman, that supports what's been happening. I don't know what's left to tell, but I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Please come forward and fill the chairs. 3 more. All right, we have about 7 more minutes.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Farmer, Wyoming School Boards Association. I'd like to add our voice in encouraging a no vote on this legislation. Mr. Chairman, recalibration is just right around the corner. It'll be a great chance for this committee to learn about the 30-some different elements that exist in that funding model. It's a very complicated model. Mr. Chairman, I worked for the Wyoming legislature when we moved from a previous funding system toward this funding system. And Mr. Chairman, when we did that, the consultant was very, very clear that the only way that things work is with a block grant model. The block grant model allows for the differences, the deviation between school districts. As Mr. Schmidt talked about, the sort of prototypical school, the sort of Mayberry that we wish we all had, but none of us actually in reality have, we have to find a way to fund schools based off of something different. And so the funding model that we have today does that. And the great thing about it is that there is a tremendous amount of data available to you to take a look at. Wyoming has better data about school finance, really, I think, than any other public expenditure in the world, if not just in the United States. So there's a lot of data out there to help inform decisions. And when you look at it, your consultants have told you that about 90 to 100% of the funding for salaries goes to salaries. They've told you that. So there's a good chance for us to do that. But Mr. Chairman, not only are we on the hills of recalibration, but there's also significant decision coming from the court, and the court talking about school finance, and the court saying whether or not there needs to be changes to how we fund schools. So I think a lot of things are premature in this bill. I think it's important to go through recalibration. After recalibration, to come back and have good discussion about appropriate mechanisms for funding. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Mr. Chairman, Boyd Brown, Executive Director of the Wyoming Association of School Administrators. I want to echo what Brian said. I guess I would also like to add just a few things. One of the things that I would like to add is if this bill excludes like 40% or more of our schools from the categorical grant, then I would suggest that it would cause some problems with adequacy and equitability across the state. So I would caution you with that. Again, I think that the money that is set aside for teacher salaries, if you go back through the CRU reports, you can see that it's always somewhere between 96 to 102% of the money is spent on that. And I'm going to pass off to Jed because I think he has some specific examples. So with that, I'll answer questions, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any questions? Are there any questions for Mr. Farmer? I think I skipped that part. All right. Mr. Ciccarelli.
Mr. Chairman, Jed Ciccarelli, Chief Financial Officer with Laramie County School District 1. Understanding the time is limited, I'll be brief and not repeat some of the points made earlier. I'll just emphasize that the block grant is vital for ensuring that school districts can deploy the resources in coordination with their board to meet their local needs and priorities. Just quickly referencing some of the information that the previous speaker mentioned as well, the CRU report, there was a number of years where an addendum was presented to the legislature that showed the exact calculations of what salaries were being utilized by school districts from the model versus what was actually deployed. the last year that I could find the report, about 99.25% of the funding model salaries were allocated to teachers in the manner that they were resourced. And Mr. Chairman, I'll just add to the Department of Education's point about the complexities of benefits being a part of this calculation. It's very nuanced, the way school districts build their compensation plans. Benefits can range from anything from complications over what the model's allocating for workers' compensation, and a district like mine who works with the Department of Workforce Services to reduce our worker compensation amount to a level that might not be to the level that's resourced through the funding model incentivizes us to control costs. Similarly with health insurance, there are years that the district's plan is less than what the model allocates. There's years that it's more. But if we look at it just in a scope of 1 year, there might be situations where that restriction on the block grant and that flexibility would have dramatic impacts. And Mr. Chairman, just one last point to Representative Kelly's point. There's certainly technical issues that we haven't had a chance to work through. How does this impact cash reserves? How does this reflect in our district's audited financial statements? Are these all these resources moved out of our general funds into a restricted grant and presented differently? What are the complications and situations that might arise if we, like a district mine, pay more than what the model allocates to teachers? Do we have to book transfers into other funds? All of these lend hand to the points earlier that this would just significantly inhibit our ability to be flexible.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none. Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ciccarelli, if you would, I didn't get exactly sure number written down on 99.25, you said were used, according to the report, were used adequately towards teacher salaries and funding?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Erickson, that's correct. That component alone, 99.25% of the model salaries were used for teacher salaries.
Thank you. All right, we are out of time for public testimony. I think we will move working this bill. You can make the moat. Committee, what is your pleasure?
How long would it take us to?
Oh, you want to lay it? Oh, sorry. I thought you were going to make a motion to do something. Okay. Yes. No, we will lay it over. We will not take public testimony, but we will work the bill at the beginning of Friday's meeting. So we are now adjourned. Thank you.